All right, it looks like we have all of our attendees ready to go. If you could hear me right now, can you just hit the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen? Perfect. Look at all these Zoom experts that we have joining us today. Well, welcome to today's webinar. We're so excited that you're here. We will be talking about growing Catholic school enrollment in a virtual world. Before we get started, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping details with everybody and introductions for today's presenters and panelists. First, we will be recording this webinar and sharing it with you tomorrow, so please keep an eye on your emails and we will make sure that you get that. Number two, please ask questions along the way. We will have more than a half an hour with our lovely panelists, so anything on your mind, let's feel free to put that in the Q&A box. On that note, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat bubble. That's for any issues that you're having, whether it be sound or anything along those lines. Use the chat button to that and the panelists will be able to help you out. Next to that, you'll see the Q&A box. That is for your questions. I'll be moderating throughout the presentation and responding to a few via text and sending the rest to our panelists to answer live at the end of our presentation. Our conversation doesn't need to stop here either. Reach out to us if we can help, and be sure to join our Slack community to connect with other leaders in our industry. Moving on, our presentation today is not about our company, but if you are not familiar with school admin, here is a quick overview. We've spent the past decade creating tools to help private and parochial schools recruit, enroll, and retain more students. Our paperless enrollment management system helps you build deep and meaningful connections with your families, even from the comfort of your couch. Our mission is to help private schools and the people who run them thrive, which is why we're here today. We hope that what we're sharing will help you feel more confident as you continue to transition into this new virtual world. We're here to help you however we can. Now I'm going to introduce our presenters today. First up is Ellen Roberts. She is School Admin's Vice President of Strategy and Innovation. She previously worked as the Director of Admissions for Gillespie School in La Jolla, California. She's currently working from home and helping her daughter adjust to virtual learning and is starting to realize just how little she remembers from her school math classes. Brandy Eppolito is our Director of Marketing, and prior to joining School Admin, she worked in admissions and marketing at the University of Texas at Austin. Brandy is also working from home with her 2-year-old daughter, Parker, and has quickly learned that the daycare teachers are drastically underpaid. Next are our 3 panelists who have been so kind to join us with their expertise and their time today. First, Steve Clement is the Senior Director of Enrollment Management for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Laura Mooney is the Director of Enrollment Management for the Archdiocese of Baltimore. And Mary Lennis is the Director of School Operations for the Mecklenburg Area Catholic Schools, which is part of the Diocese of Charlotte. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ellen to kick off her presentation today. I hope you all enjoy it.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Let me start by saying, as Catholic school leaders, you all deserve a huge high five. After all, you do extremely, extremely meaningful work, and your schools have incredible outcomes. There's that focus on service, which is so important to today's parents who are looking to raise kind, compassionate children. You have much higher test scores and college graduation rates than public and charter schools. Even better, your schools are a lower cost option than many other private schools. Yet, on the downside, enrollment is declining. If it makes you feel any better, you're not alone. Many non-Catholic and private schools and public schools are feeling this trend too, especially nationwide at the elementary school level. So what's happening? What's causing it? The 15% decline in US birth rates is definitely a contributor. And everyone is getting hit by charter schools. There is a 571% increase in that market. So clearly there's parent excitement for those types of schools. And let's not forget that millennial parents are out there and their expectations are changing. More and more parents these days are among that generation, especially parents of elementary age children. and they think and they act and they buy differently than previous generations. And here's the kicker. Data shows that the majority of parents, including millennial parents, would prefer private school education for their children, yet 80% attend public schools. The reality here is if they're going to spend the money on education, you have to connect with them in a new way. Now here's proof of that. 91% of consumers want to buy from an organization that provides a personalized, relevant experience. They want the relationship. They want service that's custom tailored to their interest, and the experience that they're provided or that they expect at every stage of the journey is critical. 66% of consumers expect a response from customer service within an hour. Yes, that stat is even relevant on weekends. Now, I'm not suggesting that you work on weekends, but it's really important to have a plan to be extremely responsive, and in a very personalized way. 47% of inquiries are submitted from a mobile device. That's a lot of folks, and it's true even for lower income families. Even for those with a household income below $30,000, 71% have a smartphone and they use it to connect to the internet. So the challenges that you face are real. Clearly, we are living in an on-demand world, and if there's not an easy way for parents to engage with you when and how they want to, they might not engage at all. And now, on top of it all, we've got COVID-19, shut down schools, it's halting our economy, it's truly hurting families, really in every sense, both personally and professionally. It's turned our whole way of life upside down. We hope that things will go back to normal next fall. None of us know for sure though. And right now, while some experts are optimistic, others are warning of a second wave. So I think we have to be honest in that we may be facing additional school closures as we go into next year. Now, despite all this, on the flip side, there's reason to be optimistic. Amidst all of this chaos, there's a world of opportunity awaiting Catholic schools. Now, of course, optimism doesn't mean being blinded by the current reality. It means having faith that there will be brighter times ahead and that these challenges can make us stronger. Harnessing that opportunity will require a sea of change in the way we recruit, enroll, and retain students. To that end, digital transformation is no longer a choice, but a requirement. In order for us to protect enrollment for the fall of 2021 and beyond, it's important to prepare now to be able to run next year's admissions process remotely and digitally in a highly connected way. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We will look at virtual admissions and enrollment. We'll talk about strategies to find more students. We'll touch on hosting virtual events, look at how you are presenting yourself on your website, and then we'll top it all off with a panel with our diocesan leaders. So at the most basic level, it's important to get the application process fully online, especially if there are steps in the process today that require families to come to school. Now, I want to be clear when I say online, it doesn't mean a downloadable PDF. Rather, what is needed is true and interactive forms. We want to be looking at forms that are mobile friendly, and you'll need a system to manage everything, all the way from the inquiry to event scheduling, applications, recommendations, transcripts, candidate review to enrollment forms. Every piece of that puzzle is very important. So think about the parts of your process there. Now, the other thing that's important is communication. It's key. No matter what system you use, your response time, as we saw from those stats, is very critical. I used to run an admissions office, and my software that I was lucky enough to have software that set an alert for me to call a family every time an inquiry or an applicant was, every time they submitted a form. And unless I was with a family, those responses were what took priority in my day, because it was my chance to build that great first impression. When I responded within minutes of a parent's submission, even if I did it on the same day, those families were blown away. They felt valued and respected, and they saw that I cared about getting to know them. That early engagement absolutely helped me increase applications, and ultimately we increased enrollment. Now, not only is it important to reach out quickly, you also have to reach out often. Sales stats say that on average it takes 6 to 8 touch points to qualify a prospect. That means voicemails, emails, and live conversations. It's also important to make those touch points personal to the person you're reaching out to. So as an example, if you know they're interested in financial aid, some of your emails might be about school affordability and outcomes. If they're interested in soccer, you might have a coach give them a call. To keep track of your touches, it's important to have a system to log dates and notes from every interaction, as well as setting dates for your next step. Ideally, you can implement software to make that easy, but at a minimum, even an Excel spreadsheet can work. Now, I've certainly used that approach when my admissions database didn't have that kind of functionality. If you can, automate some of your communication and outreach. Most schools don't have large admissions teams. Some have just one admission director. Sometimes that person wears many hats. So 6 to 8 touch points for each candidate can feel overwhelming, and it will take some time. So if your system can be sending reminders for you about things like deadlines or incomplete checklist items, or if it's thank you notes for submissions, then you'll have more time for relationship building. Now, some systems even allow you to take that level of automation further by letting you build out different series of touch points based on the interests of the family that are automatically sent at the right time. Of course, that's an ideal scenario. You know, sometimes when we think about online admissions or we think about going virtual, we imagine this very non-human, cold interaction. And we all know that's contradictory to what admissions is. Admissions is about relationships. But when we think about schools, we talk about schools, they find that when they have a strong system for managing the process, it actually helps them build deeper, more meaningful relationships. With time and automation, you can touch on the exact things that are important to each individual family using multiple communication channels much, much more often. And it makes a difference. When we work with schools to move their process online in their first year on average, this is the kind of results that we see. 18% increase in inquiries. We also see increases in applications. On the enrollment side, we see contracts getting signed faster, which helps cash flow, of course. And it helps for planning for that following school year. So that kind of automation does make a difference. With that, I'm going to hand things off to Brandy, and she's going to talk about some tips and tricks to find and engage with new prospective families.
Thanks, Ellen. Ellen shared some of those ways to help you adapt your application process to better serve your families. But for a moment, let's just take a quick step back. If we're going to serve them well in our application process, we have to have families to serve in the first place. So how do we find more families, and how do we get them interested in our schools? Maybe did carnivals or spaghetti nights or soccer games. There are lots of ways that we recruit families typically. And for right now, those methods are on pause. And we don't know how long it will be before we're allowed to bring back our conventional methods of recruiting students, those on-campus events, those in-person events. And on top of that, competition will be higher this year than ever before. But don't panic, everything is fine. You can be successful, but you're gonna have to pivot. We've used this meme a lot lately, but it's so true. You've got to get a little bit creative with your methods if you want to be successful. And one of those most successful ways to market your school to grow enrollment is not really marketing at all. We found that one of the best ways to find success for your school is to be true to your values and to be the helpers that your families need right now. Helping really is the new selling. But that of course begs the question then, how do we help families? You can definitely start small. You don't have to go big at first. As a parent of a young child, I have a 2-year-old daughter, as Emily mentioned. One challenge I find is how do I entertain her during the day, especially while I'm working? And I know I'm not alone in this camp here. Some of our panelists, we were just talking about this before the webinar. So share virtual activities to help families in your community entertain and educate their kids. Here's an example from Queen of Angels Catholic School in Seattle. They posted this virtual art lesson from one of their teachers on Facebook, and that's a pretty light lift, but it's super impactful. And here's another example. This one's from Our Lady of the Blessed Sacrament in Brooklyn. They hosted a socially distant Easter egg hunt for Easter, of course, and they invited students and families in their neighborhood to create these Easter eggs that they could post to their doors or their windows, and then members of the community could go on walks with their kids to hunt them down. It's free for the school, it literally costs nothing, but it's such a huge value for the families that you serve. And of course, be sure to extend it to the families that you don't yet serve. You could spread it on Facebook or Nextdoor. You can ask everyone in your community to participate. And if you could ask them to share it with, share pictures of it, maybe with a hashtag of your school, that really extends the reach of it. And then you have not only your current families promoting your school, but also prospective families promoting your school. And you're not even spending anything to do it. Of course, you could go a lot bigger than those two examples if you wanted to. A lot of public schools we know they're struggling with the transition right now to virtual learning. It's not a secret. So can you let those public school families in your area attend your classes virtually for the rest of the school year? If that sounds like a stretch in your mind, we actually talked to several Seattle area Catholic schools last week, and they're doing this very thing. Some were charging for it, some were kind of offering it as a type of extended free trial of their school. But no matter whether you charge or not, it's a huge, huge value for those families in your area. They're hungry for education for their kids, and they're not sure how to go about it right now. So not only will it allow those students to get access to desperately needed classes, but also those families that take you up on the offer, they're now a part of your community before they've ever even officially enrolled. And that means they're a lot more likely to officially enroll this fall. Along those same lines, maybe you could offer a summer camp. A lot of areas are starting to lift those shelter-in-place restrictions, but I know some families are hesitant to kind of go out into the wild just yet, and I think that will last well into the summer. So despite all that, their children still need something to do this summer. So can you help bridge this gap for them? Could you do virtual art classes or virtual cooking classes or science camp taught by some of your faculty members? Again, this is a great way to generate awareness, a great way to help the community, a great way to build a sense of community before they ever enroll at your school. Those are just a few examples, of course. There are a lot out there, but there are a few ways that you could help your community. But if you build those ways of serving them, how do you know the people will actually show up? If you build it, will they come? Once you've created with those ways of helping the community, you've got to get creative with how you promote it. And you need to make sure everyone hears about it. And there's one surefire way to do that, and it's your network of current families, your network of alums. The stat on the slide really says it all. It says 89% of millennials trust recommendations from friends and family more than claims by the brand. So that means your network is really one of the most powerful tools you have. So ask your network, ask them to promote your school, ask them to promote your summer camp or your virtual classes, whatever it is you're offering. Be sure to make that lift easy for them. They're more likely to promote you if it's an easy ask. So maybe you create a fact sheet that tells your network what they're promoting, what you're promoting, how to promote you, what you want them to do. It should share why you're different than the other options out there. It should also include the call to action. Do you want them to register online? Do you want them to send an email directly? Be specific and make that ask easy. Then give your network even more tools to help. Can you print out postcards from your school? Can you pre-stamp them? Maybe you drop off stacks at houses, on the porches, and then your alums, your students, they can add a little personalized note, drop them in the mail onto prospective families. Or even easier, give them an email template or a phone script so they can reach out to the families they know and that they know would benefit from your school. You can also ask the folks in your network to like and share your posts on social media. This is such a light lift for them, but it can go a really long way. Another easy one, ask your network to promote you on their Nextdoor groups and even their neighborhood Facebook groups. These groups are based on location, which means they naturally target the zip codes that your school serves. That means it's full of families that are likely the perfect fit for your school. And again, it's an easy ask of the people in your network. And lastly, of course, don't forget to promote your school within your network of parishioners via channels like your church bulletin. You'd be surprised how many parents of public school students belong to your church. And maybe right now, if their current experience is falling short, they'd be really excited to get this offer of assistance. Shifting gears a little bit, let's pretend you've tried some of those approaches that we just talked about. They were wildly successful. Congratulations, that's awesome. Huge step in the right direction. Now, how do we convert that interest into applications? Of course, we know one of the tried and true ways of taking those relationships to the next level is admissions events. Of course, those events are a lot harder these days when we're not allowed on campus. So as you likely guessed from the name of the section, it's time to take your events virtual. But before we do that, let's just take one quick minute for a poll. How many of you have hosted a virtual admissions event before? Okay, we got a hand raise. And we'll go the hand raise route. We can do that. Oh, we got the hand raises and the polls going. Okay, so the poll's running. It looks like about 70% are no and about 30% are yes. Awesome. Okay, so for a lot of you, this is new territory. For some of you, you've done it. Congratulations, that's awesome. We'll talk a little bit more about it now. So the New York Times actually just published a piece on this, on virtual admissions events. It was focused on higher ed, but a lot of the challenges it discussed are still super relevant to the K through 12 space. So here's a quick excerpt from it. The hardest thing to recreate is what we call that wow moment, when you're on campus and you're like, Mom, this is where I need to be. Here's another quote from the article, and it was actually from an admissions officer at Yale. Speakers have had to sharpen their message online to avoid losing their audience. You can get away with rambling in person when you have the body language to back that up. We realized that right away we need to be snappier and keep ourselves to a more polished presentation. So I think this one really illustrates a super important point. Attention spans are even shorter online than they are in person. And I don't know if you've seen the stats, something like the average human has a shorter attention than a goldfish. So we weren't talking a long attention span to begin with. So how can you overcome all of these new challenges and still host an impactful admissions event when you have to do it online? Take a breath, you've got this, you can do it. Here are a few big things to keep in mind when it comes to virtual events. First, keep it simple, don't overcomplicate things. Second, keep it snappy, as the admissions director mentioned from Yale. You need to be concise, so prepare that script ahead of time, practice it, and you want to make sure you're keeping your audience's attention. Also, find ways to make it interactive. Can you get your attendees involved? And on that note of involvement, involve as many voices from your community as you can. Give your students the opportunity to hear from different perspectives, and as much as you can, have the story come from your families and your students. And lastly, practice, practice, practice. The concept of a virtual admissions event is new for a lot of people, 70% it looks like, so practice to get comfortable with it. Now let's dive into some specific event ideas. First up is open house, and the goal here, of course, is to share what sets your school apart and to help your attendees picture themselves as part of your school's community. One proven format is a Zoom meeting. Remember, keep it simple, keep it snappy. So maybe kick things off with a welcome address and maybe a quick presentation from your principal. And then ideally move on to a panel with your current students and your alums. So you want to keep it interactive, of course, allow your audience members to ask them questions. So they get involved and they also get to hear from a lot of different perspectives. And you might want to allow for some small group networking by taking advantage of Zoom's breakout rooms. If you haven't played with it yet, I love this tool. We've played with it a lot over the past month. But basically it allows you to take your big group, your big Zoom meeting, and break it out into much smaller groups, all at the one click of a button. And we have some how-to docs that we can share with y'all after this, but it's really easy and it's great for maybe networking at the end of open house. Here's an example from Bishop McDevitt's ad for their Zoom open house, and it's proof that Catholic schools really have been able to pivot quickly here to adapt to this new virtual world. And here's another example that I love. This one's from Lawrenceville. In addition to their main open house, they hosted a series of Google topical hangouts over a few weeks. So one week it was focused on this one, diversity, inclusion. Another week it was STEM. Another week it was athletics. So this gives your families a chance to hear from a lot of different voices. Again, that's so important, but it's without having to commit to, a multiple hour online event just because they don't have the attention span to do that. And from the event logistics perspective for your team, it's a lot easier to do over the span of a couple weeks. Next up, campus tours. So a lot of schools are getting hung up on this one because how do you give a tour of your campus when you're not allowed on campus? So no surprise, as we talked about and have talked about a lot more than we'd like over the past 2 months, you have to pivot. So one option, of course, is to create a slideshow. You can use pictures that you have on hand, website, Facebook, all of that, use them. You can even add some background music, spice it up a little bit. But better yet, why not host a live campus tour via Zoom? So this one's gonna take me a second, but with Zoom's virtual backgrounds, you can have any background image you want. Again, we have a blog post on this we can share after. So maybe if I want to, let's see if I can do it. If I want to talk about the arts hall, I'll change my image to that. And then if I want to talk about our athletics program, I'll change my background image to that. So now I can stand in front of each of these buildings and talk about the history or the importance of it without having to actually be on campus, of course. Be sure, again, to feature as many voices as you can here. You want to feature those authentic stories from your students, from your teachers, from your parents. Remember that stat we talked about earlier. People trust it when they hear it from their peers. They don't want to hear it from you. They believe it when they hear it from someone like them. So let your families speak on your behalf. It's less about your school and it's more about the feeling of your school and the outcomes that your school leads to. This authenticity, it comes through whether you're on campus or online. You just have to make sure that you're hearing it from the right people and that you're getting to the real, get to the core of it. So I know we've covered a ton of things in today's session, but before we move on to our panel, I have to talk about your website. I'd be remiss if we got through this webinar without at least mentioning it. So let's talk about your digital front door for just a second. You're spending a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of budget even maybe, to get students interested in your school. But if you're doing all of that hard work to drive interest and your school's website isn't up to snuff, it might all be for naught. Your website really is your school's digital front door, especially in today's virtual world. It might be like the first time people are seeing your school. So for many families, it's the first impression. You need to make it a good one. This, of course, talking about your website could be an entire presentation all on its own. I'm not going to do that to you right now, but at the very least, I do want to be sure to just at least mention, please show your website some love, especially your homepage. Make sure your homepage clearly differentiates and defines who your school is, and make sure your website does what you want it to do. If you're on this call, I can basically assume that at least one of your goals is to get interested students to inquire and apply. So here's an example from Holy Rosary School in Seattle. Right away, you can see that they serve preschool through 8th grade. They have a strong focus on Catholic values, on STEM programming, and then I highlighted at the top there that pink call to action to apply to their school. I know you have a lot of things in motion right now. We've already talked about a lot. You have a million things on your plate aside from this. And so I'm not recommending that you tackle a full-scale website redesign amidst all of this madness. But I do, of course, want to encourage you to take a look at your website and make sure that it's driving people to your application, driving people to your inquiry. Make that process easy. There are probably a couple of lightweight changes you can make that will be really, really impactful in helping you meet those enrollment goals. So again, we've been through a lot today, but whether we've talked about your website or your events or your admissions outreach like Ellen talked to us about, remember that through all of this, your school is not closed. The building is closed. That's a really big difference. Your school is so much more than the physical space of your campus. And the work that you're doing, whether it's at home or on campus, it still matters. You're making such a big impact on the lives of the students you serve. We can find a way to continue doing this, but continue making this impact, whether it's behind our computer screen at home or on campus. We can continue growing even while those buildings are closed. It takes a little bit of creativity. With that need to continuously reinvent and pivot and come up with new ways of reaching our students, I know that can be stressful. I feel it for sure. So I want to leave you with one more quote from the New York Times. My sister actually sent this to me yesterday. The baby was crying in the background. Our AC had broken. My inbox was overflowing. We all have those days, right? So the quote is this: quarantine parenting is ordinary parenting at maximum intensity with quadrupled stress. But it doesn't have to be perfect, only loving, only kind. So of course this quote says parenting, but I really think you could easily replace those words with admissions. Remember that all of these changes we talked about today, this is a process. You have lots of opportunity awaiting you. It doesn't have to all happen today. Some days will be awesome. Some days your AC will break in the middle of the night when it's about to be 90 degrees. It happens to all of us. So give yourself some grace. Do your best to lead with love and with kindness and those values that matter. And I know it's so cliche. It's in fact on our list of things not to say, but I'm gonna say it. We really are all in this together, which is a great segue into our next portion, which is our panel. I'm so excited to introduce you to our panelists, and we're so happy that they were able to join us today. So they're all going through the same trials and tribulations and adjustments as you. And so today really is about sharing ideas and learning from each other. So we have Steve from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, Laura from Archdiocese of Baltimore, and Mary from Mecklenburg Area Catholic Schools. We, of course, want to encourage you to participate. So we've got prizes. Please ask questions along the way for a chance to get a Yeti tumbler. Ask them via the Q&A function in Zoom, like Emily mentioned at the beginning, and we'll pick 3 winners at random to receive a custom edition Yeti. So Laura, Steve, Mary, if you don't mind unmuting and turning on your camera, we're so happy to have you. Let me stop my sharing of my screen. Hey y'all, thanks so much for being here today.
Hi everyone.
Thank you for having us.
We're very excited. So I'm going to get things started. Would y'all each mind telling us a bit about who you are and how this adjustment period has been for you over the past 2 months?
I can go first. So I'm Laura Mooney. I'm the Director of Enrollment Management for the Archdiocese of Baltimore. So I work with all of our Catholic schools on their admissions and marketing, and trying to get students in our seats and retain all of our current families. So that being said, this has definitely been a challenge for all of our schools. Really, the past couple of months, our focus has just been on staying as active as we can on social media, just so that our families know that just because our buildings are closed does not mean that our schools are closed, and to really highlight all of the wonderful things that our schools are doing. Because as I've told our schools, I think that we are really beating our public school counterparts, and that we started our distance learning from day one, whereas our public school counterparts just didn't do that. So really using social media and our websites to highlight all of the good for our prospective parents, but as a reminder for our current parents too, because that retention piece is really going to be a bigger struggle than it's ever been for us. And so just having to make those adjustments in terms of accepting late registration fees, and really at an all-time high of working with each individual family on meeting them where they are and trying to make those adjustments.
My name is Mary Linus, and I'm the Director of School Operations for the Mecklenburg Area Catholic Schools, which is a part of the Diocese of Charlotte. We've got 19 schools in the diocese, in the western half of North Carolina, and the 9 in Charlotte are centralized, which presents always unique challenges and opportunities, because admissions, enrollment, billing, transportation are all centralized under one system. So I have specific roles for those 9 schools as well as the 10 outside of Charlotte. But like Laura was saying, just constantly staying communicating virtually as much as we can has been the most important priority right now, as well as kind of connecting with the colleagues that you don't see every day. My dog and my husband is not a replacement for those colleagues you get to see every day. But it's been a fun couple of weeks. I don't know what day we're on, but hopefully that light at the tunnel is getting there to be able to return back to our offices.
Hi everyone, I'm Steve Clement. I'm the Senior Director of Enrollment in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. We have 104 elementary schools and 17 high schools in the Archdiocese. My role is working with the centralized high schools and then working with the elementary schools when they reach out for support, as they are a parish-driven model. We focus on, obviously with my 2 panelists before me had said, the communication, the social media marketing, and then also a shift to, in my office, manage the financial aid process to watch how our current students, our enrolled students, and then any prospective students are managing their way through the funnel, and then watching their financial aid process as well.
Sounds like y'all are all staying a little busy these days.
And the newly minted stay-at-home dad, which I can't wait to get back to the office. I'm not there.
Not a title you ever wish to have.
No, not a stay-at-home dad.
I wanted to jump in with a question. I know, Laura, you had mentioned how you had an early start in offering your distance education as compared to public schools. And I'm hearing a lot of private and Catholic schools talking about this. And they're also talking about new offerings that they're coming up with. So not only their digital learning for today, but new offerings that they're coming up with that might help parents, particularly public school parents now and through the summer. And I wonder if there are other things that you are all doing and how you're reaching out to different audiences with those regards.
Well, I mean, I know that our schools, they're, doing the distance learning. So that's, the basic curriculum, by offering Zoom meetings, things like that, as well as all of the assignments for the students. We're also really encouraging our schools to do a lot of community activities. So having like a daily morning prayer where everybody in the school, is able to participate, or having dance parties, with the school as well, to keep so that the focus isn't just on academics, but it is on community building and, keeping and that value. I think in terms of additional offerings, like are they going to offer summer courses or summer camps? I think we're honestly still in the day by day, just trying to get through with everything. That I don't believe that at least our elementary schools have made those plans yet. I work with some of our high schools, and I know that, that we're thinking about doing that, but there is still so much unknown that it has been difficult for us to nail those plans down.
Thanks. Mary or Steve, do you have anything you'd want to add on that front?
I would like to add, our schools are continuing as if, they were in person. Like, for example, we are doing end of year grades, where I know some of our public school counterparts are only offering pass-fail. And so to be able to offer that when other schools are not able to, it's a great marketing point, but also to be sensitive to that. You don't want to say, oh, that school's not doing what they should. And so we're trying to kind of navigate how we can use this as an opportunity to market ourselves even better than we have in the past by those offerings. I love those ideas, Laura, what you were saying about those community events. I love hearing from our schools and what they're doing. I know they're definitely the principals are leaning on their student councils for different things. Our middle school is hosting grade level dances. So I'm curious to see how that is. I did offer to chaperone, but I'm not sure how that would work. Recess, virtual field trips. So the possibilities are endless. And just being able to then put those on social media or your websites to help gather that excitement and attention for those prospective families who are now looking online, seeing what your school is all about, and seeing what your current students are doing during this time.
The only thing I'll add to that is trying to honor the 8th graders, the kindergartners, and the seniors on their way out. A big part of the enrollment director's job is to make families happy. And we know that we have legacy families that come through. So trying to leave the class of 2020, whatever segment they're in, whether it's the kindergartners, preschool, et cetera, leaving them with a positive exit point from our schools. So we're doing, taped Zoom, taped YouTube videos for graduation, and getting seniors, their portraits in there, and having the Archbishop speak. But that's a hot topic for us right now, is making sure that from an enrollment standpoint, we're taking care of the folks that are leaving our schools. While we can't do it together yet, letting them know that the opportunity is coming.
We had a few questions come in over sports and coaches reaching out to students. Steve, I know you mentioned that you had a little bit of experience with that. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about your expertise?
Sure. Before, I'm a recovering admissions director. I was a high school admissions director in one of our schools in Philly. And I also moonlighted as the football coach. So that was always a unique juxtaposition for me, was, preparing to play a game and then preparing to recruit students. In Pennsylvania, we're part of the PIAA, which is the public league. And our coaches can reach out to athletes as long as they've shown interest in the school. So as the admissions director, I would have to show the proof that the family filled out an inquiry form, came to an open house or a shadow day or visitation day, you know, some sort of an event. So it was imperative for me to have a system that could track that. But I could have any of our you know, employees or volunteers reach out to a family once I had that proof. And we have had states call us on it. But once I had that proof that, yes, that family had visited me. So I know all states are different, but that's how we handled it, just having the backup to show that the students started organically through the admissions process.
I mentioned something I want to talk on that is kind of tangentially related. You talked about getting the coaches involved. We received a question that we get kind of typically, or kind of frequently, which is, how can we engage our teachers to support admissions efforts without totally overwhelming them? I know they are already working so hard, so I want to be sensitive, but we also always say admissions is a school-wide effort. So it's true, everyone's working really hard, but how do you balance getting them involved in the process, which can be so impactful, while being cognizant of their time?
I can speak to that a little bit because I am a former teacher too, so I do understand you know, what they're going through. And I think the key to it is, you know, Brandy, some things that you touched on in your presentation is that you just need to keep things very manageable with them. You know, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So you have to give them small things that they can do one step at a time. So, you know, like this week, we're going to focus on our kindergarten teachers and trying to encourage retention from pre-K to kindergarten. So kindergarten teachers here, you know, can you reach out to these 5 pre-K families and can you send them, you know, and even divvying it up, you know, you reach out to these 5 families, kindergarten teacher, you reach out to these 5 families, and can you send them one email this week, you know, and just kind of breaking it up like that? Or can you be present for this one virtual Q&A admission session that we're doing, you know, from this time to this time? Or can you do a Facebook Live event for us? So, you know, kind of coming up with an array of ideas, but then breaking it into a schedule where they don't feel like, gosh, you're asking me to do 100 different things this week, and I'm trying to teach my current class.
Thank you. You know, that kind of engaging teachers in your process leads me to think of another question that was asked in the panel, or that was asked in the Q&A around e-learning. And the question is around the fact that it says we're struggling with losing our incoming students to public high schools. And it's frustrating knowing that our e-learning is way ahead of the public high schools that they're choosing, but parents are choosing those schools because they're free. Do you have any messaging tips to show, really just to show how you're providing value?
Sure, I can take a stab first. We have, in the high schools, we only retain about 54% of our families from our elementary schools to our high schools. We have 17 private Catholic high schools in the Archdiocese as well. When you combine those two totals, the Archdiocese retains about 80% of the families in Catholic schools. That's a win for the Archbishop, not necessarily a win for the enrollment office. So we try to tackle that additional 20% of those folks that are going to public or charter. The hardest thing for us is charter schools have uniforms and they're free. We have uniforms and we cost money. So we try to show in the recent world the constant digital learning that we stood up in 2 days, the idea that this is really 3 pillars: academic, social, and Catholic identity and spiritual, and showing that and the importance of that. And I think tools like Facebook Live and doing a prayer service live really show that. We're blessed with a 98% attendance rate right now in our high schools doing distance learning. So it's never for us to message against our private, our charter, private or public, because we need them to really be successful in Philadelphia. It's just showing the data. Like our kids are easy to sell, and we say that all the time, but now it's just constantly showing the data across all our platforms that this is working. And heaven forbid we have to start this way next year, we can make this work and make it better.
We received a question a couple times actually about social media is great, email is great, but what other ways can we find and engage with prospective students? I know y'all mentioned a lot of those great ideas for retention, which is so important, and I'm glad y'all mentioned it because it's not always covered. But what other ways have y'all found success finding completely new students?
Digital marketing, because that's where you're going to find families. We've been working with a number of schools while we've been on this quarantine, with, doing not only social media advertising, but, Google display ads, Google AdWords, things along those lines. And so, and obviously word of mouth and putting things on your website and on your Facebook page. I mean, that's all crucial, but then, really taking that additional step and doing some aggressive paid advertising for your school. Digital is where it's at anyway. And now with the current state of affairs, it's going to be that much more vital. So that's what we've been doing.
And we found relationship building with a lot of feeder schools and different partners in the community to be very successful. I know that's hard to start right now when you can't go knock on a door and start that relationship. But if you can build any of those relationships that you do have now, that's a great way to stay connected and get those brand new families. Charlotte's a market that sees a lot of families that relocate. So working like with the Chamber of Commerce and the Better Business Bureau, as well as when we see different companies that are relocating and moving their headquarters here, we always try and stay ahead of that and kind of get in touch with them to see how we can be at some of their kind of meetings and things that they have for their employees that are moving to the area, or just some ways that we've found a different opportunity to meet new families.
The only thing I would add to that, and I agree with what both of them said, was going kind of old school to press releases. We had a school last night that was on the local news who their teachers did a parade through the local community to say hi to all their students. That finds folks. That's when you see the spike in your inquiries. So kind of going a little old school, I guess, and just getting the traditional PR press releases out there. We're blessed that the communications office centrally handles that for us, but trying to just get back on ABC and the like.
There are a lot of good templates out there for press releases that you can build pretty easily. It's not as hard as you think. I think it's another one of those things that seems intimidating but isn't as hard in practice. Mary, you mentioned the targeting companies that are moving to the area. I think that's awesome. We talked in one presentation about using like LinkedIn ads targeted towards specific companies that do really well at your school if you're in a big enough urban area. Has anyone tried that, like really targeted LinkedIn ads? And if so, was it successful? Just curious.
We did not in our situation, so I'm not as familiar with the targeted ads through LinkedIn.
Not yet. Okay, cool. Just curious. Thanks.
We've only done them on a development perspective from fundraising, and I know enough about fundraising to be dangerous, and I don't want to upset any CFOs.
That's fair. Ellen, it looked like you had one.
I wanted to jump in. I'm seeing a lot of questions about school affordability right now with the environment. We're seeing questions about current families losing their jobs. We've got questions about should we offer more financial aid? Should we charge for school that's closed? Even parents that are looking at if next year schools are closed, I can't afford daycare and tuition. So do you have any strategies there that you might share?
Ladies first.
Yeah. Go ahead, Laura.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I will just share that within our diocese, we have made the decision not to freeze tuition or make any changes for this year or next year with what was originally proposed. But one unique thing that we are currently doing, that was what I was working on before this webinar, is creating a separate emergency tuition assistance fund that's totally separate from just families that usually will need tuition assistance. And we're being more flexible with that in the sense that it's supposed to be temporary, in the sense that if it's for a family who might own a restaurant, you know, once they get back open and seeing their regular business, you know, they really just need the help the first 3 months of tuition. So we're kind of, and then at each quarter, we're going to revisit with that family and see how they're going. What does it look like? Are we able to provide more assistance, or are they able to pay more tuition at this point? So a lot of flexibility in that during this time with a separate pot. And then we're also being as flexible as we can with our typical enrollment policies and procedures and fees, in the sense that, you know, we're pushing out our late fee. We're rescheduling payment plans if they need to start them later than the typical time. We're just trying to be as flexible with every family situation as we can.
We're going through our financial aid applications and pulling out by occupation to see if there's anything that is alarming from a certain occupation, you know, waitress, hairstylist, etc. We all know this knows no bounds, but trying to have kind of like heat markers around to see where we should start. And we're starting with our enrolled families and folks that have already registered prior to really adjusting any new families' tuition assistance. We lifted all of our deadlines this year for applying for financial aid. I would suggest if you have a company that has a hard close date, if possible, to keep it open. We're going to keep ours open throughout the summer to get any latecomers, since we don't know how long this will last. But you know, we want to focus on, you know, retention. While we always want to grow our schools, we want to keep the customers who've already joined us, and then the folks that have joined us early. I feel that the folks that have followed our deadlines should get a little bit of a perk out of this, and try to get back to them and help them to make sure that they can enroll come September.
And the only thing I would have to add is that we have had, to my knowledge, I think we've had one of our elementary schools so far has given a communication to they're in a financial position that they are able to offer some tuition remission for the 1920 school year that will be credited to families' accounts next year who stay at their school. You know, it's just sort of a good faith, you know, effort to these families for sticking with them. And so we actually, just while I'm on this webinar, there's been a template that has gone out to all of the schools that if they are in a position to do that and they feel that, you know, it's necessary in order to retain some of their families, that they can do this. But I mean, we really haven't, you know, recommended that tuition be frozen or anything along those lines, since we are still offering distance learning to our families.
And I think that's important. You're providing a lot of value in what you offer, so some of the messaging is there. Do you see any opportunity, you know, to try and branch out to families? Not every family is facing financial hardship that's out there. Are you strategizing on ways to recruit new families that could potentially afford the school to supplement the need-based families?
Well, in the digital marketing campaigns that we have been working on, that is the nice thing about digital advertising. You know, Google knows all, and so, you know, we are able to, you know, be able to focus more on families of a certain income level, because, yeah, I mean, marketing to certain income levels, especially at this time, is just really not going to be possible. So that's one strategy we've done.
We have our schools have shared their webinars and their Zooms for virtual events back on their website and let them live there in a whole virtual space. And I do think that, you know, we're constantly attracting families from all this press. As I think it was Brandy in her slide said, you know, don't forget the website. Folks are going to get there and make a decision about us before they even call our schools. So having those virtual spaces that incorporate all these great events that we've already done, let them live there. There's no harm in that. I don't see it on my side. So showing those back out to the public, and hopefully that makes them reach out to you directly.
We've had a few questions come in about using your students and your families for some of these tours or panel interviews. How, if you've done this at all, how have you been preparing them? Have you given them a script? What's been your best experience doing that?
Have an MC, have someone be the master of ceremonies. We had our first school that did it was an all-girls school in Center City, and they had their admissions director moderate the panelists. So just like the school admin folks are doing, they would have the questions and direct them to, you know, who the softball player is, who the science teacher may have been. But having an MC made the difference from some of the others I've been on. So you have one person muting and unmuting and directing the questions, as well as practicing. But to me, of all the advice we can give, have one person control, you know, the questions out to everyone.
Awesome. And there have been some other questions about practice sessions and everything like that. Do you have any recommendations for when a student or a family on the panel end up having any audio or tech issues? Because as great as Zoom is, it's not always perfect.
We've had most of our schools try it at, you know, that after dinner time. We do have one school doing what they're calling like lunch bunches, where current students get to meet with prospective students. But make sure you're following your acceptable use policies in your diocese or archdiocese or schools, that you're meeting, you know, supervised and in safe spaces. But we have found that kind of after dinner time works, but also, you know, just polling your panelists to see what works for them. This way you're not adding to their schedule. And then being honest and open about, like, hey, if kids pop in, that's great. If dogs pop in, so be it. But that's what we've seen. Just being open and honest with your panelists and when they can do it has been successful.
That's awesome. Thank y'all so much for joining us. So much great content. The time with y'all flew by way too fast. We have a lot of questions that we weren't able to make it to today. So we will send out the recording tomorrow, and we'll also include in that email the link to the Slack community. So we definitely invite you to keep the conversation going there. We know we're all going through a lot of the same things. We're all in it together. I hate to say it, but it's true. We're all in this together, so let's learn from each other and lean on each other in this crazy time. Thank you so much to Laura, to Mary, to Steve. Thank y'all for joining us today. Before we officially end, we have one more quick poll. We always want to do better. We always want to serve you better. So please rate this webinar so we can keep improving more moving forward. But with that, thank you, Steve, Laura, Mary, Ellen, Emily. Thanks to the whole gang. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone that joined us today. We know you're busy and appreciate your time. So thanks so much. Bye, y'all.